Okay, so thank you. We're just about to start now. So welcome to the Kent and Medway online learning event today, and really exciting new topic for you today. So we would appreciate your feedback at the end. Thank you. Next slide. Next slide. So just quickly before we start the main topic, this is just some wellbeing workshops that are coming up in Kent on some different topics, and you're more welcome to join us. And when the slides come out, you'll be able to click on the link or visit the Kent Resilience Hub to find out future dates and topics coming up. Thank you. Next slide. Okay, so today you're here to hear from us about it's time to engage boys in their wellbeing, what's stopping us, lots of information and lots of tips and strategies for you today. So hopefully it'll be a really good session, and do keep your questions coming in the chat, which we'll answer at the end. Thank you. I'm going to now hand over to Dr. Matthew Burgess, who will start the presentation. Thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Matthew Burgess. I'm an educational psychologist and I'm here to talk to you about masculinity and help-seeking behaviours. Next slide, please. It's just a bit about educational psychologists and what we do. So you might know us as the guys who come around and do the HCP assessments, but we also do consultations, so problem solving with teachers. We do interventions, so sometimes therapeutic interventions and designing interventions. We do training, much like the one that I'm doing right now, and we also do research, and I'm here to talk to you about a little bit of research that I did a little while ago. Next slide, please. So I did a doctoral thesis called An Exploration of Masculinity as a Barrier to Help-Seeking Behaviours for Adolescent Boys. Shameless plug, but if you wanted to Google it and find out more, I wouldn't necessarily recommend reading every single page, but yeah, there's a lot more detail than I've got time to give you now if you want to find out more about it. It focused on what social factors support and or reduce adolescent boys help-seeking both in and out of school. Next slide. So some of the context for why I wanted to do this piece of work is because some of the statistics around suicide in boys and males in general. So the BPS calls it the silent epidemic, and the reason for that is because despite there being 2.5 times fewer depression diagnoses for school-aged males, they're also 2.2 times more likely to die by suicide. And that disparity was, I guess, complex and confusing to me. A lot of people suggest, well, if there's not those depressive symptoms, then how can it be that there's the higher level of suicide or higher likelihood of suicide? And it's not that the symptoms aren't there, in my opinion, that it's actually that people struggle to notice them, and also that boys struggle to make them known. And so I wanted to find out more about that and why that happens. Next slide, please. Some of the local context, there's been a 65% increase in crisis presentations to CAMHS. It's a little bit out of date because it's 2018 to 2022, and of course a factor in that would have been the pandemic, but also some of the tier 1 support has been reduced, so the closure of local youth centres and also decrease in funding for pastoral care in schools. And also an increase in poverty and adverse childhood experiences, which is a massive contributing factor to emotional well-being difficulties. So when you've got this lack of early support for young people, and also that missing middle tier between reaching CAMHS threshold and also not a level beyond which schools might be able to support with, plus you add in that boys often really struggle to talk about their emotional well-being difficulties. Those two things combine to create a really significant problem for a lot of adolescent males. Next slide, please. A little bit of theory. This is the masculinity hierarchy by Connell from 2005. So atop that is hegemonic masculinity. This is idealized cultural norm where there's an ideology about masculinity being it's really important to be strong, to be powerful, to be dominant, to have sexual conquests, and it's also really important that this group don't show behaviours that they consider to be feminine or of a gay male. And if we think about some of the societal examples, you might think of someone like Andrew Tate, or if you've watched the Louis Theroux documentary recently about, I can't remember exactly what it was called now, but that there's lots of examples of this type of person on there, and that you've got this group of people that have a particular level of social power, and it's not uncommon to happen in schools, that those who are the toughest, the strongest, do tend to be the ones with the most sort of social stature. And boys see this and they think, okay, well, if I want to be like that, then I need to show some of those behaviors. And that group of hegemonic males, they will be looking to subordinate others. And so they're looking for who shows the most masculinity, or who shows the most effective form of masculinity. So, for example, by being strong, not doing things like crying because they consider that to be feminine, or and not wearing certain clothes and all that sort of thing that they might consider to be of a gay male. And if they see those sort of things, that's when young people get bullied for that sort of thing. And of course, because social standing is so important to adolescents, particularly if they're, worried about being bullied in school, they want to be able to show these behaviors that mean that they are going to be sort of protecting themselves from that. And so you get this socialized norm where it becomes completely the safest way to be is to not show emotion, to not seek help, to look like you're super independent and that you're in control of all your emotions all of the time. And yeah, that can cause this problem where we don't have help seeking, we don't have boys looking for support or showing their emotions in ways that might enable them to draw support towards them. Next slide, please. So this is all it's very common amongst sort of gender socialization. So I'm sure you've heard things like big boys don't cry. So that's from a very young age. That's drilled into boys, of course. And also there's differing emotional literacy levels. So for example, by age 10, emotional literacy is quite similar amongst boys and girls. But by 13, girls are already way ahead. And part of the reason for that is because boys don't often talk to each other about their emotions, and therefore they struggle to use the language that might enable them to do that in the future. There's also a theory called gender intensification theory that suggests that gender stereotypes are enacted more from the start of adolescence, so by the age of 12 or 13. And some of these stereotypes include that males are capable of coping alone, that they have a high tolerance of pain, including emotional pain. They're emotionally stoic, they don't act like girls, whatever that might mean to them. They're overtly heterosexual and they don't require support from others. Okay, next slide, please. I thought it was also important just to talk about some of the differences in language that boys might use that might be different to girls in schools. So I think that when we're looking at sometimes diagnostic tools, and also whenever we're looking at some of the language that we consider around to be typical of emotional well-being, so things like anxiety, depression, low mood, that sort of thing, a lot of these terms feel very alien to boys, and so they're much more likely to use terms like I feel stressed or I feel tired, or they talk about their utility or their usefulness. So they say things like I'm useless, I'm worthless, I'm hopeless, or my life is pointless. um, these are terms that are much more likely to come from boys than things like I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling worried, I'm feeling upset, I'm feeling sad. And that can sometimes mean we miss some of the things that are really important when boys are trying to say, I am struggling. Next slide, please. So you can see this graph here. So, sorry, not graph, the table that essentially says these are the type of words that boys use much more frequently. But it's really important for us to just think about, okay, if they're not going to use anxiety, depression, distress, upset, sadness, etc., what are some of the words that they are more likely to use so that we can relate to them and recognize that, okay, these are words that we might hear, and if these are words that we do hear from boys, what does that mean for them? And just recognizing that if we start using terms like anxiety, depression, etc., they might not relate to those and also might completely disengage. A lot of boys don't like to think of themselves in that manner as being depressed, anxious, etc., that can turn them away from seeking support because it doesn't match up with their masculine identity. Next slide, please. So a lot of boys, because of these reasons, they might mask their distress. So they might be experiencing really significant levels of emotional need, but might not show it at all. They also might show it through more non-verbal ways. So, for example, you might find that they're more irritable, or they might show types of emotions that are more acceptable amongst masculine communities. So, for example, anger, they might fight more, they might punch walls, etc. And some of the problems that we have from that is that, particularly in schools, that a lot of the more feminine coded emotions or ways of showing emotions, such as crying, might draw in support from teachers, from friends, etc. Whereas some of the ways that boys might show it, because this is how they've been sort of socialized to do so, might push away support. So if they are fighting, or they're punching things, or they're shouting, or they're being angry, or might be considered aggressive, that tends to push away support and also get you punished in school, perhaps even excluded. And so, yeah, they end up being pushed away for their emotions rather than drawing people in. And sometimes it's that boys, they might not want to actually seek help directly from you, but they might be showing behaviors that they're hoping you might see and go, is everything okay at the moment? Okay, so it might be that they are wanting to draw you in, but don't really want to say it out loud. So, yeah, we'll talk a little bit later about that check-in approaches tend to be quite effective with boys. So, yeah, next slide, please. So findings from my thesis were it was with focus groups. So I had a group of boys who basically talked about their emotional well-being and what did they find effective, and also what are the things that they thought about how they might present differently to girls. And they talked a lot about positioning females and homosexual males as beneath themselves a lot societally. So they were talking about, oh, well, girls, they would just go and cry in the toilets, wouldn't they? And talking about them really disparagingly, like this was a really bad thing to do. But we're also recognizing that they really struggled to seek help with their own emotional well-being difficulties. So they sort of saw the hypocrisy of what they were doing, but also recognized that they were kind of in this societal situation they couldn't really break free from. They also used narratives that decided who were the hard boys and who were the soft boys, and also said that, you know, those who are soft, and if they cried and that sort of thing, they deserved to be bullied. They also said that actually expressing the emotion, so they said they weren't allowed to talk about emotion, they weren't allowed to say that they were struggling, but also if they just showed the emotion directly, that wasn't allowed either, and that if they did that in a group of boys, then they would get laughed at. And also encouraged that they should be laughing at each other for that as well. And they also talked about or wasn't so much they talked about, but whenever one of the boys talked about emotion-related language and said, "I remember this time that I was struggling," immediately one of the other boys would sort of redirect and start making a joke about something else, and it became really clear that they were really uncomfortable talking about emotions and help seeking because, you know, it was completely unfamiliar to them, and therefore they were constantly just trying to distract each other and move towards another different type of conversation. Next slide, please. So just on a theoretical level, just thinking about how we're talking about the masculinity hierarchy earlier, that adolescents are really keen to be popular amongst their peers. I think we all know that as pretty obvious amongst adolescents. And if we think that, you know, boys tend to construct power by showing more masculinity, that we have this situation in schools where boys don't want to talk about their emotions because they worry about the potential social impact that that could have upon them. And therefore, help seeking is a problem for them. It's not a viable option. And when they experience well-being difficulties because they don't talk about them frequently, they really struggle to recognize their own needs and their friends' needs as well. And they because of that, they also find it quite uncomfortable to help each other. Okay, next slide. I think just before I move on from those explanation of findings as well, I should just make it clear that I don't believe that every single boy out there is like this, of course. I think it's important to recognise that this is a societal structure that I do agree with Connell that does exist. It doesn't mean that every single boy is always looking for them to be the most masculine man, and that should be the be all and end all. But I do think that this is a factor in why the limited emotion related language comes from boys, and I think that's quite a prominent situation for society. So some of the practical recommendations for individuals, I really recommend finding out more about solution-focused approaches. So obviously I don't know sort of level of training in this room in relation to that sort of thing, but there's some books that I could recommend. I could pop onto the slides if they're being sent out. But essentially, solution focused approaches, they focus really heavily on sort of not so much avoiding the problem, but not getting so bogged down in the problem. Boys often don't want to talk about the sort of complex emotions they're feeling. And so finding a way to go, okay, I recognize there's a problem. What do you want instead? And finding ways to work towards that instead of thinking about what's the problem, how are we going to solve that problem? It's more, what do you want that you don't have at the moment, and how are we going to get there? So yeah, there's lots of ways to go about that, and it's really effective amongst male populations. Also, empowerment through language. So exactly like I was saying earlier, using those terms that boys are more likely to use can be really important. I had a teacher tell me recently that one of the boys they were working with was experiencing some quite significant distress, and they said, "I'm cooked, miss. I'm cooked." And we were trying to work out what on earth it meant, but just picking up, I think that's quite a new piece of language as well. But essentially, they were saying, "My social standing is very damaged at the moment, and my friends don't want to hang around with me anymore." And yeah, just knowing that helped her to manage the situation and recognize, okay, how are we going to solve this together? Next slide, please. Emotional literacy support. So if there's any possibility of, for example, in PSHE to be teaching about emotional literacy, using language that's going to enable boys to talk about their well-being more directly, can be really helpful. And if you've got an ELSA, or if you are planning to have an ELSA trained in the future, then that can be a really valuable resource to helping that to happen. And then also discrete online access. So a lot of boys, Jamie's not presenting today, but I was working closely with Jamie a little while ago, and he was saying that the boys that he worked with both were saying, "I'm not talking to you until you can guarantee that what I'm saying is not going to be, put on the internet, or it's not going to be told to all my friends and stuff." Being discreet is really important to male populations, even more so than for girls. And face to face can also be very confronting for boys as well. There's a lot of talk about things like shoulder to shoulder conversations being important, but also boys do tend to veer towards online access. We have access to Kooth in Kent, and I've been told that they're rebranding to Saluna by Kooth in the autumn. So just keep an eye out for that. So I'm not just telling you the wrong name of the company or group or whatever they are. Next slide, please. Just before we start the video, I just want to say we put together this video a little while ago. It's just about the ways that you can support boys. I forget what the school was now, but we worked with, it was Barton Court, I believe, but a group of boys there, and they were fantastic in talking to us about what helps their well-being. But this part in particular, it's going to be really uncomfortable to me, so I'm going to have to watch myself on video. But yeah, I'm hoping it can be helpful for you guys. There you can play. Can't hear myself.
Sorry, Charlie, the sound's not playing. Bear with this moment while we get the sound to play. 1 second.
Years. Hi, I'm Matt Burgess and I'm an educational psychologist. I'm here to talk to you about boys' wellbeing, how to spot the signs when boys are struggling, and what schools can do to support. Boys' wellbeing has generated a lot of coverage over recent years, and it's easy to see why. For school-aged young people, we see a gender paradox, where boys are diagnosed with half as many common mental health difficulties compared to girls, yet boys consistently have poorer long-term mental health outcomes. This has been coined as the silent epidemic, as boys commonly experience significant well-being difficulties, but due to many reasons, such as socialization, stigma, differences in presentation, and difficulties in help seeking, don't feel able to ask for support that could improve their well-being. And even when they do, adolescent boys often struggle to find a type of support that suits their identity and needs, making their therapy dropout rate higher than any other group. As many boys do not seek well-being support, They are also far more likely to adopt unhelpful coping mechanisms, such as through substance misuse, risk-taking behaviours, displaying anger, and socially isolating behaviours, such as excessive gaming. Boys also don't tend to seek help early on, meaning their needs only tend to surface once they've already hit breaking point, making it key for us to think about the early preventative measures schools can take, which can give boys the necessary tools for good, lifelong emotional well-being. How do well-being difficulties tend to present in boys? One of the key theories of male socialization is Connell's theory of hegemonic masculinity. This suggests that boys are more able to construct social success through demonstrating more typically masculine behaviours, such as through showing toughness, independence, reduced emotional expression, and speaking negatively of those who show more typically feminine behaviours. Boys may therefore make fun of other boys who cry, need help from others, or show affection. Many boys have therefore been socialised by adolescents to not display emotions in ways they see as feminine or risk being bullied or ostracised. The problem with this is that we typically visualise common mental health difficulties such as anxiety, low mood and poor self-esteem through ways females more commonly present them, such as crying or telling friends of their difficulties. Each of these behaviours tend to draw in support from others, whether friends or teachers. Boys often alternately present the same difficulties through verbal or physical displays of anger, defiance, engaging in arguments, or disengaging from their emotions entirely and remaining silent. This means male typical ways of showing I am anxious, I am depressed, I am locked in self-hatred often push others away rather than draw them in, and are often seen as bad behaviour in schools rather than a reason to offer support. If we really want to see change, when we see distress displayed through anger or avoidance, we might stop asking, why is he misbehaving? Or why has he stopped talking? And start asking, what is he communicating through this behaviour that he isn't able to tell us verbally? What can schools do to support boys differently? Before being an educational psychologist, I've been a teaching assistant, a teacher, and worked in pastoral support in a secondary school. I found that support for the majority of boys doesn't require specialists or complex interventions and can be delivered by school staff. These are some of the things that I've found helpful, all of which are backed by academic research. First, prioritise the relationship. Research suggests the relationship between help seeker and help giver is one of the strongest predictors of change. Consider how to build the relationship between yourself and the young person before engaging them in any wellbeing support. Secondly, encourage peer support. Boys sometimes find it easier to talk to peers than adults. Consider ways we can teach boys to be helpful friends, so if their mates are struggling, they know how to be good listeners and good supporters. Third, promote online help seeking. In Kent, we have access to Kooth, an online platform where young people can speak directly with a counsellor through text chat. Ensure posters or other promotional materials are easy to see, and that staff are aware of online platforms like Kooth so they can recommend them. Fourth, if you're working with boys that do not like to talk about feelings or problems, try solution-focused approaches. These are conversations which shift the spotlight away from the past and towards what the student wants in the future. The NSPTC has an excellent free resource on how to hold solution-focused conversations that concentrate on goals and the future, rather than problems in the past. Fifth, normalise and promote positive masculinities. Masculinity has received some very negative press recently, and some boys feel that adults are trying to push them away from masculinity altogether. Instead, encourage the positive forms of masculinity, such as being brave when standing up for others, being assertive without being dominant, knowing when and how to be a leader, and having the courage to support others when things get tough. What's one example of when you've supported boys with their emotional well-being? One practical example I've used is a group called Sport and Support. It was designed specifically for boys who needed help but weren't very forthcoming about it. We used the 5 ways to well-being to create a space that felt safe, accepting, and crucially, was fun so that boys would want to come along. We held 50-minute sessions, which started with a 10-minute check-in, where boys rated their mood out of 10 and shared one thing that happened this week that made them give that score. We'd then have 30 minutes of sport, like football or cricket or table tennis, with the boys taking turns choosing the activity. We'd usually have 2 adults at each session, so if there were any boys who were having a particularly difficult time, one adult could offer a listening ear whilst the other led the activities. We then finished with a 10-minute check-out to see if the session had helped them feel any better. The ways to well-being include social connection, being physically active, learning new skills, giving to others, and paying attention to the present moment. This group gave the boys opportunities to meet new people, engage in physical activity whilst learning new sports, help others when things were tricky, and and to think about how they're feeling without having to go into it in too much depth unless they really wanted to. It's likely only slightly different to activities and groups you already have in your school, so it probably wouldn't take too much time or adaptation to deliver something similar. And if the group you're working with don't like sport, find something else they enjoy. The key thing is they have an opportunity to socialise and talk if they need to. Boys have so many traits that should be recognised and championed. So many of their struggles are not personal failings. They are behaviours which have been socially ingrained since long before their adolescence. But just because their norm before now might have been that they felt their emotions weren't valid, doesn't mean that in your school we can't create a new norm where they feel empowered to show a range of emotions and feel accepted. With this, we can give them the tools to become an emotionally and socially capable generation of men who are kind, resilient, and proud to find support when they need it.
Thanks, everyone. Try not to cringe too hard at that, but yeah, I hope that it was helpful. I think perhaps it was yeah, maybe explain some of the things that I'm talking about now in a more succinct way than I've done so far. So some other things as well. So I won't go into them too heavily, the ones that I've already spoken about in the video, because I don't want to repeat myself. But one way to be to in terms of whole school recommendations is to invest in staff training. So of course, if you're here now, then that's great news. You'll all have access to educational psychologists at schools in Kent, and there might be opportunities there that there could be training from them that could support you. There's also ELSA training, which can be really valuable in helping in sorry, can be helpful in training a teaching assistant or similar to become a support assistant for children who are experiencing emotional wellbeing difficulties. And also just to recognise about strong relationships is really important, just to reiterate that, but also that boys do tend to find that having that personalised support that schools can offer, where they're not going to, for example, a GP who they don't know at all, but knowing that they've got a teacher or a Senko or someone else who's in school who they at least know their face can be really helpful for them to feel like they can go to someone that they trust. Next slide, please. Also really important to consider male role models. The amount of times in my career that I've heard, oh, it would be fantastic to have a man on board, but and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to disparage men at all, but also just really recognizing, okay, it's important to have like a diversity of masculinities amongst our male role models. That it's okay to be a different masculinity away from being a dominant leader or anything like that. So, and also if they're male role models who are able to talk about their emotions and are able to talk about how they feel during lessons and all that sort of thing, then that can be really valuable too. Normalize your emotional range. So if there's a common way of talking about emotions in lessons, whether that's to do with, I don't know, it could be to do with if you were watching a film in a lesson, or if you were listening to music, or if there was a poem or a piece of text in a book, to talk about how that feels, normalizing talking about emotions in those sessions, and enabling boys to feel normal talking about their emotions too. And also that having dialogue with boys directly about their masculinity, I've always found that it's been like massively surprising how fantastic boys are at talking about being boys, essentially, that they recognize what masculinity is and they recognize how it might be impacting their presentation. And I thought that this was, having done a lot of academic work around this sort of thing, oh, this is what I do. This is what I do, and boys might struggle to do that. But I found that almost every boy that I've worked with has been able to say, "Oh yes, that's probably because it's a boy thing," and then you can go into more detail with that. But yeah, the amount of times that I'm amazed by how boys understand those sort of socializing factors more than they let on is yeah, it's always really impressed me. You can do it. You can have those conversations. Next slide, please. It's just the last slide from me. As I was saying earlier, check-in type support can be really helpful for boys, because as much as it is difficult for them to perhaps seek help in the first instance and go to someone and say, I'm struggling, that even after that, do they want to keep going back and back and back? If there's any way of being able to go to them and say, oh, I'm just checking in to see how you're feeling after last week, they might feel that that's more acceptable for them than having to, seek someone out again and again and again. Again, as I was saying about online help seeking, discretion is really, really important. That obviously we have the safeguarding parameters, and there are times that we have to share information, but be really clear with boys when you're talking to them. Okay, there are these safeguarding parameters, and if there's this kind of thing that's said, then I will have to share it. But outside of that, this is a confidential space. It makes a big difference. Boys are really, really keen for other people to not know about their difficulties, and understandably, given the social context that they're in. So yeah, it's really important to keep that in mind. And then final point, school culture is a massive factor. If you've got a culture where it's not okay to talk about feelings, and it's not okay to talk about things that are difficult, things that are challenging for us, then it's going to be really difficult for them to recognise that you as a school staff are people that they can trust and talk to about that sort of thing. So yeah, if there's any ways to sort of promote that positive ethos where you're able to talk about emotions and that be a really normal thing, it becomes a more normalized act for the students. Thank you so much for your time, everybody. We're going to have a question and answer right at the end, so it won't be directly with me right now. But thank you. And yeah, I'll speak to you at the end if you've got any questions for me.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Emma Price, and I am an exclusion intervention advisor with the Kent Prue and Attendance Service. I'm part of a steering group for the Kent and Medway Boys Impact Hub. Now, Boys Impact was founded by Dr. Alex Blower in 2023. Alex is a research fellow at the Arts University Bournemouth, where his primary focus is creating the conditions for sort of equitable access to education. The Boys Impact approach is founded in principles of relational education, developed by Northern Ireland by the Taking Boys Seriously research team at Ulster University. The premise is based on how to see boys as relational learners to support the outcomes and progressions of boys, particularly free school meal cohorts, who do present with the biggest educational gaps. The University of Kent and the Kent and Medway Progression Federation collaborated to launch a network hub to recognise specific needs locally and to tackle the challenges with localised context, which boys are facing in our 13 districts. Next slide, please. So the approach, recent narrative has often meant that masculinity is sort of prefixed with the word toxic, and the approach very much explores what it means to be a boy or a man in today's world, what constitutes sort of the guy code, lived experiences, and developing ways to champion boys. There's an overarching approach which looks to develop an ethos which takes boys seriously with a systemic framework for professionals to improve engagement, well-being and academic outcomes by moving away from the sort of deficit narratives, focusing instead on inherent strengths and building a culture of high expectations, but rooted in relationships and long-term commitment. To this end, how can we as professional working with boys sort of change views and discussions around toxic masculinity, which, is applicable to the minority actually, to the progressive masculinity, which of course is the majority. How to create a safe environment in which boys can feel safe to express themselves, and the safe spaces in the communities for boys to develop that emotional vocabulary to navigate challenges constructively. Co-design solutions which have the voice of the child are up front and centre, so they feel confident to be able to express themselves, and that being their true self, not a masked version of how they perceive that they perhaps should be, in order to then thrive and be connected to expectations via real life context, to build motivation. Next slide, please. So there are 10 principles as outlined here, and they're designed to provide a shared language to which to articulate issues related to masculinity and inequality in education and guide the development of educational ecosystems which create the conditions required for young men and groups to flourish, regardless of whether they may have had experience of structural inequality. These principles are there to underpin and enhance policy and practice to support the outcomes of young men in their local educational, social and geographical contexts. So today we're focusing obviously on the principle which is the promotion around positive mental health, and it is hoped that this principle and the other 9 where applicable can be used to create content and to embed into activities to provide a consistency and persistency of messaging. Next slide, please. So boys can be reluctant, as Matt has said, to discuss and share feelings and emotions as they perceive this as a sign of personal weakness. Professionals who intentionally promote and encourage positive mental and emotional help will help increase boys' well-being, their resilience, tenacity and confidence. As boys navigate the turbulence of sort of physical, emotional and cognitive development that occurs during adolescence, they will benefit from being understood. So what would indicators of success look like in your practice? How can you intentionally use this principle in your practice, i.e. ensuring you demonstrate an awareness of the multiple pressures a boy is possibly facing, and then how this is explored to achieve perhaps a change in outlook or their perception, or the implementation of a support plan to reduce the anxieties around those pressures. Of course, although these principles are to aid the taking boys seriously as relational learners, all the theories and the understanding will by proxy be just as valuable to the girls, and what works with boys can often also support girls as well. Next slide, please. So for more information, please do use these links which champion the progressive masculinity. They give full descriptions and additional support around using the 10 principles, what the key research findings demonstrate for each one, what the key indicators of success might look like in terms of what boys are reporting. And within the boy quadrant, there's also an excellent survey of questions which will help you understand the views of the boys that you're supporting in order to then create a bespoke action plan. So the University of Kent have recently just delivered a learning series of 3 parts, which I have to say I thought were excellent. So please do look at the Kent and Medway Progression Federation website for future events. I will put that link in the chat for you. So it was very short and sweet sort of interlude by me just to promote these 2 sort of taking boys seriously principles and the boy quadrant. I really do think they can help underpin things that you're doing in school, the ethos, the culture, as Matt has discussed, and help you understand where boys are coming from, what their views and perceptions are, and how we can break down some of the barriers that they're facing. Thank you very much.
So good afternoon. My name is Sarah Jones. I work for the mental health support teams. I'm a high intensity cognitive behavioural psychotherapist. And we are also working with University of Kent and the Taking Boys Seriously Ulster Principles. Next slide, please. So the background to the mental health support teams is we've seen a disparity in the ratio of girls and boys referring. And we know from obviously some of the evidence already found that adolescent males show the lowest rates of professional help seeking for mental health. So the MHST specific data showed a gender disparity of 27 to 73% of those seeking mental health support in secondary schools. Evidence also suggests male-only and informal spaces can improve engagement. And so our team designed a project to try and help explore those barriers and co-design more accessible mental health support for adolescent males with a view to increasing referrals and then improving outcomes. Next slide, please. Actually, next slide, please, because this is described in a much nicer way on the next slide. Yeah, so some of the qualitative feedback that we got from boys who had already been into some of our spaces, reasons why they might not come forward. So keeping it private, there was definitely an element of lack of trust. They highlighted concerns regarding confidentiality and trust, that is one of their main barriers in access and support. This was widespread. Also, as already been mentioned, and we're all very aware of how negative societal pressures are affecting young people at the moment, boys and girls, concerns around being effective, but the awareness of the support and perceptions of what we can actually do for those young people. The boys in one of our focus groups shared that also they're much more likely to trust other people. And actually, I suppose it's talking to friends and family members. They see that as that would take priority before speaking to somebody they didn't know. They also discussed the negative impact of stereotypes around mental health. And we know there's obviously a lot of social media impact with influencers at the moment, some of which they named. And they discussed the importance of those influential individuals, but that how we need more positive role models to help, I suppose it's like drown out some of the more negative connotations that are coming through. Next slide, please. So what can schools and services do to promote trust and confidentiality? So we appreciate this is always difficult, but from our time in schools, it is about the trust. So about being clear about policies and differences across healthcare, education and social care. Something we've noticed is as NHS staff, young people assume that we're maybe from a mental hospital. We've had a lot of undoing of that. So we're required to wear our badges when we're in schools. We think that is a positive thing, but yes, some of our young people have said they see it and they instantly think that we're doctors or that they're going to get carted off to a unit as such. So that's something else we've had to be really clear about with schools, about what our position is in the school also. Ensure transparency in risk formulation and escalation processes. So I suppose it's that being really clear that we're not promising young people to keep things confidential when we know that's not going to happen, but also being really clear about what will happen and why. Develop adolescent-friendly access points to care to develop accessible support. So school-based, digital and community hubs obviously all play their part there too. And look, I appreciate, we know space is a premium in lots of schools, and I know this is not always easy, but it's something that I'll go on to in a minute of how we've tried to promote that too. So we've also looked at, the need to enhance training and create spaces for professionals to be able to manage confidentiality and child protection duties when you are faced with these in schools. An integration of mental health support systems so that all professionals can collaborate effectively, but while respecting confidentiality boundaries. So I suppose that's that. We've known for a long time about the collaboration, voice of the child, about professionals not assuming that other people are doing the work. I think it is something we are all much better at, and actually it's really nice to be here today because I think a lot of the information that has already come prior, we're tied into, we're working with these agencies, and I think we are better at doing that, but still a lot more can be done. Next slide, please. So actually, next slide, please. So the lobby project was the plan of how are we going to create a space for boys. This was exclusively for boys. Next slide, please. So we spoke to young people. We picked one school to start off in, and we looked to identify barriers preventing boys from accessing our support specifically. And also, but just how we could encourage them to engage with other support options that we were fully aware some schools were really good at offering things, and whether it be seen inside or outside of school, these young boys were not accessing any of that support. So so we created a focus group with boys in years 7 to 10, thematic analysis conducted to identify the key themes. So the proposals were about sharing findings with staff and updating about how we would advertise this. We launched the lobby as an idea in an informal space, mainly as a way to introduce those young people to people that work within our service. And we were fortunate enough at the time to have 2 male members of staff that took this and ran with it. because we know from evidence that it shows that a male influenced male voice can be key to helping get young boys on board and to engage. So the evaluation, so compare help seeking attitude scale with baseline data. We track the number of boys discussed at inquiry reviews, pre and post pilot. So inquiry reviews is the method, it's the meeting in which we discuss young people that might be suitable for our service. And then if it's agreed that they're appropriate, they would then be referred. So that's just the name of the meeting in which that would be done. Because that's what we also found. So I just wanted to highlight, we weren't having as many discussions about boys as girls, even prior to referral. So the number of cases being brought, the disparity between male and female was there to see. It wasn't just a case of who actually comes through, less boys were being brought forward for discussion. So we compared male referral numbers with the baseline. We reviewed our data and feedback from the lobby. Next slide, please. So these are some of the posters that were put around the school. So we did a Spotify session, all based around a love of music. We did a football session and we did a board game session. And I'm sure you can probably identify, we didn't just want to pick one set of boys that might enjoy something. And what was highlighted was it was a very different level of age and attitude in who came forward to which of those groups. All were successful in their own right and all were really well attended. Next slide, please. So this is some of the feedback that we got. So it was pretty much give us more. We liked it, keep doing it. Obviously the football went down an absolute treat, that's no surprise. But that's, I suppose, what we were finding is that the space that we had, the time that we had, and actually it did actually inspire and create lots of very healthy conversations around mental health. However, we did look at how can we replicate this on a larger scale. So this was only in one school. So something that was fed back is that, yes, it went ever so well. I'll show you, actually, it's coming on the slides. We did see a slight increase in referral. However, from these particular groups, there were maybe 1 or 2 referrals that were really key, that we managed to, encourage out of those spaces. So I suppose what we're saying is we can see that it worked, but we fully appreciate that having the time and the space and the staff to create these spaces to do it in the school day, I can completely understand from working in schools myself how hard that actually is, and how do we replicate that on a much bigger scale. Next slide, please. So session feedbacks, as you can see, they were really highly rated. So pretty much all of the young people that attended enjoyed the session and wanted to come again. I think that pretty much overall, the way that it was targeted, they knew what they liked. And because they had a choice of 3 different types of session, obviously they knew they were coming to a session that was designed around them in the first place. So I suppose we would have expected to see some quite good feedback on that. But it was just nice to see that obviously the sessions were positive and received very well, and did lead to some referrals into our service too. Next slide, please. So yeah, so here, I mean, we can see, so it did increase some discussions and it did increase some referrals, but because it was such a small scale project, we didn't expect to see significant changes. And again, we can see some peaks here. There's still some data here that we still need to identify and work out why that was, and maybe we just won't know why. But yes, so we saw a slight increase in cases being brought forward, but it was, nowhere near significant figures, but as to be expected. Next slide, please. So the referrals received into the school. So what was interesting, so from year 23 to 24, the disparity between girls and boys was 73% girls, 22% boys. So after we'd done this pilot in this specific school, we saw that figure change to 68% to 32%. So obviously there was lots of other things going on. We can't prove a direct correlation in between the work that we did but it did buck the trend of some of our other schools. So it's definitely given us food for thought, stuff to work on. But again, the question remains, how do we fit it in the timetable? How do we how do we do this? And as I'm sure probably some of you are already thinking, this did exclude girls. So the feedback was that girls were looking at the posters and quite rightly saying, well, I want to do that and I would like to do that. So I suppose that's the other question in. We know that male-only spaces have a place, but it's also, we need to increase the figures in MHST, in the mental health support teams, for girls also. So that's the way we're looking at that, about how do we emphasise boys' health without excluding the girls. And as Emma quite rightly said, we can't assume that what works for one won't work for the other. But that is something that does need more work. Next slide. So yeah, just some resources here. So again, just saying about working with the University of Kent, the Taking Boys Seriously. We're also supporting Principle 5, which is the promoting of mental health, but I know that's already been given to you in previous slides, but here's some other bits for you that, again, you will be given these slides, so we're not expecting people to write this down today. Next slide. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I'm now going to share a few slides with you. These were actually created and put together by Jamie Freeman in the I Thrive participation team, who did all the work but sadly can't be here to share it, so I'm doing that for him today. So I'm just going to share some more information with you. Thank you. Next slide. So during 2025 and early 26, Jamie, as I said, a participation worker within the I Thrive participation team, he met with groups of boys and young men who were in years 7 and 12, between years 7 and 12 at schools and alternative provision within Kent. They were informal sessions where they were volunteers that came along, they weren't forced to come, and they were having discussions around what was stopping boys and young men from accessing mental health services and what they thought would help support their mental health. So the next few slides are going to share some information directly from the boys and the young men that were spoken to. Next slide. So the first question was, what stops young men and boys finding support? Some of the boys said society, family, peer pressure, fear of judgment. They should be able to speak about anything they're struggling with and shouldn't feel embarrassed. Boys feel embarrassed. They would be weak, not manly, told they're not good enough. I think some of those things are probably you've heard before or would imagine boys and young men are saying. Next slide. So boys and young men that were met, that spoken to, they were asked what do they need to be able to talk about their mental health. And these are some of the things they've said. And some of these are things that we've come across already today. So watch football. So that was kind of talking about football, watching football, but having general maybe discussions about other things as well in an informal setting. There's a lot about embarrassment. Boys don't want to feel embarrassed, make any support easy to access as well. A safe space being important to talk about their health without being judged or embarrassed. And lots of talk about playing outside with sports and games or games inside that make you feel comfortable and open to discuss issues with someone. A lot about confidentiality, boys talking about group support with agreement to confidentiality and having trusted adults as scared people will find out. There was one concerning comment there you can see where alcohol enables me to speak to others about my feeling. So that was something that one young person said that they found helped them talk about. And obviously that's not something that we would encourage at all, but it's a safe space that they need to talk about their feelings and how they feel judged and not heard maybe sometimes. Next slide, please. These are some of the things that came from the discussions with some barriers and solutions that the boys and the young men came up with. So some of the barriers we had here were boys felt any conversation with an adult wouldn't be private and they feared it would end up being out in the open or online. They said that it was important that they needed to feel reassured about confidentiality. Another barrier was they'd feel embarrassed sitting outside a counsellor's room where other young people would see them and wanted to avoid this situation. So the solution they came up with was they wanted it to be less visible, informal ways of accessing support. Another barrier was services not tailored for boys, especially sitting talking to a stranger. And that another solution they said to that could be being outside, taking part in sports or walking. Another barrier was mental health labels could scare boys away. And the solution to that was board games and card games to allow boys to open up over time. So that more informal talking session like we've had from the lobby sessions today and not branding it around mental health. And finally, the last barrier they shared here was traditional sitting and talking sessions. They preferred to keep groups and sessions fun, engaging and activity based. Just before I go on to the next slide, I'm just going to share a video on the next slide, which is some of the boys and young men that Jamie's been working with. And this is one school and a group of boys and young men that volunteered their time, their voices, but also to share some voices of other young men and boys that Jamie had been working with. It's only about 3 minutes video, but it's hopefully a video that you'll be able to share with other boys and young men and that might inspire them to seek support at a time when they need it. So next slide, I'm just going to play the video. Thank you.
So when a friend's struggling, I often notice that they might go quite quiet and secluded, and they just won't be like themselves. Like if my friend is normally quite chatty and outgoing and talks to you a lot, if they're struggling, I sometimes notice that they just keep themselves to themselves. They might have their AirPods in, listen to music, or just not really be ready to socialise with you.
I think when a friend's struggling, I notice when they're a lot quieter. So if they distance themselves a lot more, maybe if they're just like secluding themselves from activities like playing sports or just being quiet in general, to be honest.
When a friend's struggling, I notice they're just a bit down, a bit quiet, more like reserved a bit. So it's important to let them know that I'm there when I can sense they're down.
When one of my friends struggling, I kind of notice they're like less likely to come out. They're like not really themselves. They kind of tend to keep themselves a bit. Like if you're asking to meet up or like do something in school, they say, "Oh, I can't, I'm busy." They don't just kind of seem like they're in a shell or something.
I think the best way is always to just be there. A couple of years ago, I had a friend on a ski trip going through a hard time. Just to be there with him, he just talks about his problems. That helped him. He seemed to be fine at the end of it. So just being there, having someone to talk to is really important.
When I notice one of my friends is struggling, I always make sure to let them know I'm there. So for example, I call them. There was an instance before where I noticed a friend was down and I just asked him if he was okay and I said, "Did you want to call?" So just that support was just, I feel like that's all you can give really.
So when a friend was struggling recently, he was going through a tough time, I invited him out to go and play football, and we just went out for a couple of hours and just played football and just chatted about everything, but in like a setting where it wasn't confined, you could move around, you just could enjoy doing something while talking about it. And I think it really helped both him and me to feel like we can talk to each other more.
What helps with my well-being is going outside, spending time with my friends, spending time with my family, not being alone as much. You've got to surround yourself with people who you feel comfortable around.
When I'm having a difficult time, it just really helps to get outside, distract myself from everything that's going on. So being with loved ones, like you say, play football, with my friends, it just really helps to get outside and keep yourself distracted.
So when I'm struggling, I like to talk to my friends and just ask them, just tell them what's going on and just let them know. Like, I don't always ask them for help, but I just want to let them know what's going on, so that they are aware that if I'm being off, if I'm being different, then they know why. And I often will talk to trusted teachers or trusted people I know around me and see if they can give me any solutions to what I'm struggling with.
It's important to know that there are services out there for you if you're struggling.
Okay, so that was just a short video that the boys worked on together, and hopefully you'll be able to share that with other boys and young men in your schools, and it might inspire them to seek support or how they can help their friends. It was Barton Court Grammar School that supported us with that video, so did want to say thank you to those for allow us to film on their school during the school day. But the boys and young men that Jamie had been working with really wanted to highlight the need for boys to support each other and how they can reach out to friends who might be struggling. So hopefully that come across in the video. They wanted to share examples of how to support others with the video. And older students, they felt it could be really important for them to offer support to younger students within their school. They thought that was a really good way that they could help peers. Next slide. Moving forward, the plan is to older students thought that activities and sports aimed for boys within schools could enable boys to possibly feel more confident to discuss their worries and concerns with peers or teachers. And some suggested lunchtime and after school groups run by older male students would be a good idea to help boys. Next slide. So that's it from the main presentations today. We're just going to move through to just a few slides now around further information and support, which some is linked to the specific topic, but also mental health and wellbeing in general. Next slide, please. Diane.
Thank you, Lorraine. So as Lorraine said, this isn't necessarily specific to boys and mental health, but I wanted to take the opportunity to highlight our offer from the Public Health Child Health Programme, which is available to our Medway schools. So the Child Health team run a PSHE network and can provide support and consultations. They run a peer ambassadors programme to support schools to embed peer ambassadors around mental health, and they also have a range of different training offers, so you can see things such as the youth mental health first aider training there, the new suicide prevention to support with the information that come out around PSHE, as well as ACEs and trauma-informed practice and resilience facilitator training as well. They also have a number of different resources, so they have the RSE scheme of work and PSHE packages, and PSHE for parents and transition support as well. So do pop an email to childhealth@medway.gov.uk if you wanted to find out more information about that. Not on the slide, but we do also have our mental health leads partnership. So our next session is on the 16th of September. So if anyone is interested in joining that, it has a focus on emotional wellbeing within education settings, and our next presentation is going to be around I Need. So then on the next slide, I just wanted to pull out specifically the RSE training. So this is a one-day training which is suitable for those planning and delivering RSE in primary and secondary schools in Medway. The course runs through how to deliver RSE in line with the new UK government guidelines. It talks about identifying features of high quality RSE based on research evidence. It looks at some of the techniques used to support effective teaching and learning, including distancing techniques and creative ways to approach a selection of RSE topics. It provides an opportunity to reflect on your own sex education and to think critically about negatives, sex negative and sex positive discourses, and also to think about what needs to be in place for effective RSE to happen. So there's a session specifically for primary settings. The first one is currently full, but there is a second session available on the 2nd of October. But if you can't make there's one on the 2nd of October, do put yourself on the waiting list. And if there are any additional training sessions that go out, then you'll be informed of that. And also for the secondary session that's available on the 9th of July, there is still space for that. But again, if it does fill up, then please do put yourself on the waiting list so that we can let you know if there are additional sessions available. Moving on to the next slide, the Child Health team also have a parent and carer video channel, and you can see that there are a number of different sessions that they've run. So they've got specific ones there around anger management, self-harm awareness, building resilience for men, and men's mental health, which all linking quite nicely with the topic. So obviously the slides will be shared, but you're welcome to obviously to scan the QR code now, but again, welcome to access that. These were created obviously for Medway, just where we sit in Medway Council, but obviously I don't think there's anything specific to Medway in there, so you should be able to access it across Kent and Medway there. And then finally from me, I just wanted to highlight on the next slide our children's mental health website, and that includes a range of different services, including our new Medway Therapeutic Alliance, which provides short-term support for children and young people aged 5 to 18, inclusive of their 19th birthday, and also up to the age of 25 for care leavers and those with special educational needs and disabilities. And they provide support for a group and one-to-one interventions, peer-led support, and a number of different workshops. And they'll also be offering specific clinics for schools to support development of their whole school approach to mental health, and a number of different training opportunities for professionals as well. So the medway.gov.uk/child mental health website is services and information that is specific for Medway children and young people, but I know on the next few slides there'll be information around Kent children and young people. If anyone is interested, we do have this image available as an e-flyer, so I can send that over if you did want to be able to share that in your parent mail, or we do have it available, as you can kind of see here, in terms of widescreen, if you did want to include it in any reception areas as well. That's all from me. Over to the next slide.
Thanks, Diane. Okay, yep, just a last couple of slides now, just for Kent specific schools. Just behind the scenes, we've been working on the Kent Resilience Hub, which hopefully is a website you're all familiar with. The link is on the slide and when it comes out. But we've now got a new subject, a new section, tab along the top when you go onto the homepage called Services and Support for Young People, which we've made a bit more easier to navigate, so hopefully less clicks, but we've put some specific subjects on there that are often searched or looked up around needing more information. So just to highlight really that those subjects are there for you to look at, and they contain resources and information for you to use and look through at your leisure. On the next slide, we have some other local offers that's available. So just a reminder, obviously we've heard from Sarah today from the emotional wellbeing teams, mental health support teams. As I'm sure most of you are aware, they are rolling out across the whole of the county in Kent and Medway and up until 2030. So hopefully if you don't have them already, we will be coming to you soon to let you know that they will be coming to your area. So we need you to be patient just a little bit longer. We also still have the school health offer available, and please do, they have a breadth of offer and services available and information and signposting, so do remember to keep in touch with those. And Couth has already been mentioned at the bottom there. On the next slide, we have some more information around newsletters and guides that have been sent out recently in Kent. They literally went out this morning, actually. The June Emotional Wellbeing newsletter and the Young People Keeping Well This Summer guide. Please do share that with young people. It's specifically aimed at those, and some really great tips in there. We do still have the exam support guide, which is available online, and the guide to mental health support around the iThrive approach is still available for you to look at. Next slide, please. Just some other useful links and information here that we've already mentioned, the Kent Resilience Hub, but we've also got Mood Spark, which is directed for young people and co-produced with young people. So lots of information for them to get some self-help, self-guide resources. In the middle screen, it's quite small, but that's our Get Help Now, which you can find on the Kent Resilience Hub, which is a nice flow chart to help if you're stuck with unsure where to go next. It's a good step-by-step process for you to follow. And the consultation line as well is still available for you to get some advice around specific young people that you're concerned about. And there's further details on the slide when they come out to you. Next slide, please. And just going to share this, if you've not seen it already, Child Safety Week, there's some resources that are being shared with you, and the link again will be sent out on the screen with lots of resources. Can you do the next slide, please? That is available to you with posters, etc., and assembly resources for you, and you can share with young people in your setting. Thank you. Next slide. There's just some ideas, so you can display the posters in your setting, use the assembly resource, and share campaign posts via your social media channels. Although this is targeted during Child Safety Week this week, the resources will be available and still relevant past this week. So if you don't get a chance to schedule into your assemblies, they'll still be relevant. And the posters do not have the specific date on them, so there's something that can be used past this week as well. Next slide. Now, just before we move on to the evaluation, we're going to do the breakout rooms and questions and answers. So I'm going to stop the recording there, if that's okay.